Figure this out. Parker Andrews.
Hello and welcome to the StrongCast.
Retake.
Hello and welcome to our goal to help you
Nothing much.
We chat with athletes, experts, and innovators to get their insights on optimizing the movement experience. I'm your host, Dr. Neil Toussaint.
All right, and we are back. I figured it out. We are all good. Take two.
All right.
Welcome, everybody, to StrongCast number 25. StrongCast is where we talk all things performance and longevity. We are joined by Dr. Parker Andrews. What's up, Parker?
Nothing much. Just chilling.
That was insane. I wish there's no one in the universe that experienced that except for me. But I was hearing three voices. I was hearing you speak, I was hearing me speak in the intro, and I was hearing me speak from the podcast. It was insane.
A
But
lot.
yeah, we're good now. We're good now. So what we wanted to do today is just have a good time and just talk about
Always.
who you are and what you bring to the community as far as like movement expertise and everything. We'll get into all that, but first, let's go into your background, into how you got into tricking, because you're a lifelong martial artist, you are a tricker
Mhm.
as well, and now you're a chiropractor, doctor of chiropractic. So
Yep.
bring us through the journey real quick.
Yeah. So from the beginning, I guess, I'll try to make it fast. So started Taekwondo when I was 6, and that was kind of like the beginning of my martial arts journey. And I would say for tricking, I didn't really get exposed to it until later on. But at the time, it was more like XMA or extreme martial arts for me. And I remember they had an XMA program, but it was for black belts only. And I think at the time I was like a blue belt or something. And I was like, man, like I don't know what that is, but I think I want to do that. So low key, my motivation to get into black belt was just to get in that class. But after I got my black belt, I finally got to the XMA class. I was like feeling cool, you know? And then I remember my first real like exposure to tricking was when Hans Wickling, rest in peace. But Hans Wickling came to our Taekwondo school and did like I think it was like a 3-day seminar. It was like a full intensive weekend of just nothing but tricking and XMA combos and all the stuff. So like that kind of sparked my interest of like, okay, like I do like martial arts, but this aspect is really cool to me. And then, so it was mostly just martial arts to me and XMA. So, you know, I did competitions growing up. And then I would say I exclusively started training tricking more once I got like towards middle school, I would say. I think that was kind of when I started to really separate, okay, this is tricking now versus like, okay, this is martial arts, because it was kind of all a mix of the same thing when I was younger. But yeah, so kept up with that, and then did competitions all the way up through college. So I did NASCA as well towards like the end of my martial arts career, like towards like end of college. And then after that was when I started chiropractic school in 2020. So, but still tricking nowadays. Martial arts, I still train, but I would say it's mostly like tricking focus. And then besides that, currently just, you know, practicing as a doctor of chiropractic. And also on the side, I perform with the Atlanta Hawks basketball dunk team. So steps off the mini tramp, doing dunks and stuff. That was kind of a cool gig to get on the side. But yeah, that's kind of just fast track or short story of, you know, where I started and kind of where I'm at now.
That's awesome, dude. You said you started around middle school. Like, how old were you when you started?
Trying to think. I would say like for tricking specifically, I think I was around like 14 or so. I
Nice.
think when I really started to be like, okay, this is tricking now. But if I backtrack more, like, I mean, I was doing like an aerial for the first time when I was like maybe 10 or 11.
That's
But to
awesome.
me, it was just kind of like, oh, this is just part of martial arts, I guess, or part of Taekwondo. But like, I didn't understand combos until I got to like middle school. And what's funny is I had to relearn some tricks because I used to do all my tricking to or like kicking to my right side. So I was turning to my right all the time. And I learned pop D leg that way. But then when I actually started tricking,
Makes sense.
I went to the left because I was like, oh, wait, I like twisting left. So I almost kind of had to relearn tricking a little bit once I was around like 14 or so. But I guess I like going to this side. But sometimes I do debate. I'm like, man, what if I had just like chosen to go to the right side like for the rest of my life? I'm like, I don't know, like would I be better or worse? Like it makes me wonder sometimes.
Some people, I'm normal because I twist right, but I'm left-handed. But some people are like they twist on the same side of their handedness, which I think is pretty interesting.
Hmm.
But yeah, so what got you into the path of chiropractic?
um well, I know you've probably heard this one more than once, but for the viewers,
Yes, for the viewers.
it's it's interesting, I'll say that. If you had asked me 10 years ago, like, hey, what are you going to do one day, like I would have not told you it would have been chiropractic actually. It kind of, I just feel like the profession kind of found me in a way. Um, is the way I kind of like to see it. But to backtrack, I started college and um, I actually started out in engineering at my first year. Realized I hated it, so switched over to the kinesiology. I was like, I think kinesiology is more on my route, and had I would say like I had more of an interest in health and science and that aspect even from the beginning. So I was like, let me do this, and then so started kinesiology, or clinical exercise physiology technically. And I think it was around my junior, like towards my end of my junior year, I was like, okay, like what do I want to do with my degree? Um, and most of the classmates at the time were all like geared towards like physical therapy or occupational therapy, basically. It was like those were the two routes for most of the people that graduated with my major. Um, and so I started dabbling in PT a little bit. And I think it was towards like the end of my junior year, I was like, I don't know if I want to do this or not. Like, I just don't know if I like the idea of professional school or like continuing more education because I definitely don't like school low key, even though I went through all this. But at the time, I was thinking about, okay, let me maybe just do something with martial arts or maybe try to go into stunts or something. Let me do something along that route. And I think it was 2019. So fast forward a little bit. So this is technically my senior year of college. I visibly remember this, but it was right before a class, and I remember I was on my phone, and I saw something about TrickStrong, and I looked at it. I was like, I had heard about TrickStrong before, like I was kind of familiar with it, but I didn't really understand it entirely. And so I went on to the TrickStrong website and like read about what it is. Like we're physical therapists that provide for the tricking community. And I read through it all, and I was like blown away. I was like, wow, like there's actually a route for this, and I'm very interested now. So I think it was that same day I like DM'd you and Han. I was like, hey, what is this? Like, tell me about this. It's like, just curious. And then that's when we talked a little bit, and I was like, okay, like, it was a cool conversation, and I think that it gave me some insight. So I was like, okay, let me explore this a little bit. And then so I was shadowing some clinics, like PT and chiro clinics, and I was kind of torn between which one I wanted to go through. I was like, I really, like PT, but Cairo also resonates with me. So kind of another backstory, I guess, that I should mention that's worth noting is that growing up, I never had any major injuries that I had to like go get surgery for. I mean, knock on wood. But ever since I was like really young, I had chiropractic care. And I feel like that to me helped tremendously and has benefited a lot with my own training, like as I've progressed throughout the years. So for me, chiropractic kind of resonated with me personally more so. And I felt like, okay, like I know this has worked really well for me and I understand it. So I want to utilize that perspective moving forward. So, because my first exposure to chiropractic, I think I was around like 13 or 14. So I think it was around when I first really started tricking separately. I was getting back pain to where I couldn't train anymore. Like it was that bad. And went to a chiropractor back home. And within like a month, I was back to 100%. And ever since then, it was like, okay, like this worked really well for me. And I always got that as maintenance care even after I was better. So I feel like even before school, like I always had the idea or mindset of keeping that prevention um, away from injuries, like from happening in the first place. So I feel like that exposure early on really helped with like my mindset, even before I realized that I wanted to do this. But yeah, not to get too sidetracked there, but that's kind of how I felt like chiropractic started to resonate for me. And that's kind of how I ended up choosing that route once I was choosing what I wanted to do for professional school. So,
Nice. So, two questions from that. First, just I'm sure some viewers might be interested. I'm interested in like what kind of treatments did they do for you for that month that you had that low back pain? Like, how did you get from
mhm.
0 to 100 again? And why, what out of that intrigued you to later pursue chiropractic?
Yeah. So reflecting back with the treatments, so my first original treatments, I would say it was probably closer more towards like traditional style chiropractic. Um, their office now offers a lot more, but looking back, I mean, the only thing I had was just simply like stem machine for like 10 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes, and then they would do adjustments for lumbar and hip and other areas as necessary. Um, but even then, I do remember like I was feeling better, but after the adjustments, I would ask him, I'm like, hey, like, is there anything else I can do, like stretches or exercises? And like, I was only 14 asking this, you know, not really knowing all this.
Hmm.
And he's like, well, now that I think about it, yeah, like maybe do some of these. And then so like he gave me some recommendations, but he's like, I mean, you're also in Taekwondo, so like if you're continuing with like what you're doing in Taekwondo, that can also help. So that helped a little bit. But there was also fast forward a little bit, once I was older, I also met another chiropractor from back home, and he was definitely more of what you would call like a sports chiropractor. And he definitely helps me a lot as far as just seeing the possibilities of what it is that you can do as far as treatment for an athlete. And he was definitely not your traditional chiropractor. Like he, of course, utilized chiropractic techniques like adjustments or spinal manipulations, but he also was a strength and mobility coach. He actually did, I think he like had like FRC back then. So like he was like early into that. And he actually let me shadow him when he would be treating some NFL athletes that would be back home during the off season. So that was kind of my exposure to like more of like a multi-model approach, I guess you could say. And that was actually Dr. Clayton Pitts. So if you're watching this, thanks. uh, and then my OG Cairo, my first one was Dr. Dominique Chanyo. So, but but yeah, so that was kind of like my exposure um, before I started school, and kind of what
Nice.
helped me a lot. So.
Cool. Yeah. So you talked about traditional chiro versus a more multimodal approach. Can you go more into that? Like, what do you, because
Mhm.
I think a lot of people, if they haven't been to a chiropractor before, they have a lot of preconceived notions, whether they're right or wrong.
Oh, totally.
And I want from a chiropractor to hear like what
Yeah,
is traditional chiro and what's the scope of chiropractic, because a lot of people think it's like probably just the adjustments is what I would imagine most people are
right.
thinking.
Yeah. Um, no, I think that's a great question. I would say before like to specifically dive into like, what's traditional versus not, within chiropractic, there are so many different techniques and styles of chiropractic. I almost kind of think of it as, martial arts. Like martial arts is the umbrella term, but like you have specific techniques under that. Chiropractic has that a little bit as well. So like chiropractic is this umbrella technically, and underneath it are these separate techniques. And in chiropractic school, they, at least at my school at Life University, they showed you at least the 5 or 6 like standard techniques that most providers utilize. So for me, like I never really claimed to be like, all right, I'm just going to do this one technique or this or that. Like I basically used more of a diversified technique style where it's like, okay, I know this really works well for hip conditions. So like I'm going to use that if somebody's having a hip issue and they're not getting the benefit they need yet. So I would say with like, to answer your question with like traditional versus like maybe a multi-model approach is like a traditional chiropractor might only pick one of those techniques and say, okay, like I'm only going to do Gonstead technique. So that's like one of the techniques that's very popular in chiropractic. And they have their own analysis, adjustment techniques. So it's not just like the actual adjustment, but it's also their analysis might be different too. So it does depend, and I think it would be too long of a podcast if I broke down all the techniques and analysis styles that each of them have. But that would be an example of like a traditional chiropractor, and they only use that. You get adjusted. All right, cool. Like maybe we do some modalities here and there, maybe like some decompression table, maybe, but that's kind of what you would see from maybe your traditional chiropractor. That's all they would probably do. Nothing wrong with it. I just think that for our demographic, treating athletes is you definitely want to have more tools in the toolbox. But I would also argue that might be better for just even the general population. So for more of like a multi-model approach, it's like, yes, like
So real quick,
we,
sorry to
yeah, go
interrupt,
for it.
but what do you mean by multimodal approach? Because I know what you mean, but I know that some
Okay,
people
yeah,
watching
yeah,
might not understand what that is.
for sure. So multi-model just basically means that we're not just going to see it through one lens. So I'm not going to just utilize, like as a chiropractor, like I'm not going to just only see through just your spine and just adjust you. I'm going to also be seeing the perspective, okay, how are our functional patterns? Are our movement patterns looking functional or dysfunctional? Okay, why? Is it because of something going on in the spine, or is it because of a soft tissue issue? It's kind of a funny word to say, soft tissue issue. Is it, a stability issue? Or is it a strength issue, a mobility issue? So we can start to break down maybe what's the actual root cause of your issue, and whatever that is, let's tackle that. Because for me personally, there are clients that I see that honestly, I might not actually really adjust just because I don't feel like that's their main priority of what they need. For some people, they may already have a lot of mobility in their spine. So typically we use adjustments if we see that there's obvious restriction, for example. But let's say, they're very mobile, they actually just need more stability in their joints. I'm going to focus on stability training. So that's an example of more of a multi-model approach. So it's not really identifying with, oh, I just do this or I just do that. It's we're going to use whatever tool you need as an individual to get you better. And that's kind of the approach that we use with like Performer's Edge, and that's what it's all about. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. But yeah.
Absolutely. So what do you what do you basically let's actually back up from where I was going to ask. Let me
Sure.
put it this way. What kind of clients do you typically see?
Yeah. So the majority of the clients that I see are people in some type of movement art, such as dance, martial arts. Maybe they might be in stunts or stunt work. Since we're here in Atlanta, there are a lot of stunt people here. But I do have a couple that, are, older patients. Like I have one guy that came to see me recently. He's like 80 years old. So it does vary, but I would say the majority of people that come to see me, or majority of my clients, are people that are doing some type of movement-based activity that they want to continue doing at a higher level without sustaining injury.
Makes sense. So well, first of all, so obviously we work together. So I think that'd be something
Yeah.
good for the viewers that don't know this. But since Parker had reached out to me, it actually ended up that we work together now, which I think is insane because when you first started this journey like 6 years ago, and you messaged us, you actually went through with it, through with all the schooling and through with all the education, and that's a lot of work and that's a lot of dedication. So kudos to you, bro. And kudos to
Thank
you
you.
for staying on me and
Yeah.
and now we work together and it's awesome. And so
Yeah,
you
it's
you mentioned
crazy.
you mentioned Performer's Edge, which not a lot of people might know about because we just started that in December. But for those of you who don't know, that is what we're calling our one-on-one services. So it's still under the umbrella of TrickStrong, but it is our one-on-one services platform basically. So whether you're in Atlanta and you can see us one-on-one, whether you are seeing us virtually, we do virtual sessions as well, or we also do production and event services. So you might see us at a tricking event, tricking gathering, live shows, etc. So we are expanding in that way, and Dr. Parker's been helping me out with expanding that vision, and it's been really awesome. How have you, I know we're live here, but how have you enjoyed working in
Dude, it's
this
crazy. What the heck?
capacity,
I'm kidding.
like like compared to like what you're doing before, or maybe like the other paths of chiropractic, like because I know you have a lot of classmates that have now ventured professionally and all this kind of stuff. So how do you see the route that we're taking, working pretty much primarily with performers and athletes versus like the traditional population? Because you did have that experience as well in your clinicals and whatnot. So like,
Yeah.
how do you see that being, like, how do you find being a performing arts chiropractor, basically?
Yeah. No, definitely. I think that there are some similarities, but obvious differences. Because prior to me graduating, I basically did a clinical rotation for half a year. So I worked at a clinic in Atlanta. Um, and I would say that was, great for my foundation. But, it is a different setting just because with a clinic like that, like you're only maybe spending maybe 10 to 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes if you're lucky, with each individual. So I would say it's definitely more volume heavy in some of those clinics. And I feel like with this model that we have, or this approach, we're able to spend more one-on-one time with every individual that we see. So we may be spending an hour, sometimes an hour and a half, really to address every little thing that is necessary for them to get better. So not only are we focusing on, the here and now, like, okay, let's do this trigger point, or let's do this adjustment, or um, it's also about, hey, like we're going to have a plan of what you're going to do for the next 4 weeks, and here's what you're going to do on your own. And we lead them through that and coach them. So I feel like maybe that's the word I'm looking for, is like, I feel like the difference I feel working for Performance Edge or what we're doing versus maybe like a traditional clinic is I feel like not only am I like a clinician, but like I also really feel like a coach, if that makes sense. And I mean that in a good way, is that like we're constantly giving the right advice at the right time. And it's not just, oh, like we're gonna wait till, you just come into your next visit. It's constant and it's adapting. So I think that's the biggest thing that I notice working with clients through Performers Edge versus maybe a traditional clinic, if that makes sense. Um, but yeah, but also working on tours with like we were in Colorado recently with a theater company for the Thorn, and that was a great experience. So yeah, I think it's also just meeting the demands of what they're needing as well, because it's not just about, oh, do I feel better? It's like, hey, like I need to be performing in 2 days, like at a very high level. So their version of 100% is different than maybe your average population. And I think maybe that's another big difference is that you're going to have that gap versus like, you know, people in a general setting versus a performer level, basically. Well, hi. Athena got home.
Nice. Hi, Athena.
Neil says, hey, but, but yeah, so I think maybe, and feel free to add on to that, but like I personally think that now that I'm talking about it more, I think that's a huge thing is that our demographic, their version of 100% is not the same as like an average person's 100%. So, and I think that's why we're different is like, maybe a traditional clinic, their version of 100% isn't going to be enough for them. So I think
Yeah.
that's the unique value of solution that we provide.
No, I mean that's spot on. Pretty much every single session I have is a combination of I went somewhere else and they didn't take my issue seriously or they didn't realize the demands of my activity or sport, which, in general, a lot of stunt performers, etc., that don't really get fully what they need from a traditional chiro clinic or physical therapy clinic. They might not be getting that individualized attention, and they also might not just be being pushed hard enough because TheraBands is very different from falling from like 10 feet. So, I mean, that gap is
Exactly.
just too great to try to meet. To be like, oh, okay, I'm, at basic level, I can walk around, I could do daily activities, but can you jump off one leg repeatedly and do crazy flips? Can you jump off of a 10-foot height with guns? Can you fight 10 people? Like our demographic is quite different. Like, can you dance on stage? Can you perform like multiple times a week? So totally agree with
Yeah.
that. And that's something that it's funny because in our phases, and I don't really think so like, oh, we're in this phase, we're in this phase, but there is that
Mhm.
when I'm with a client, I'm like, all right, for yes, I understand your goals for sure. Like we do have to get you back to that high level and we will. But first you have to be a basic human that can actually like live
Mhm.
throughout your day without pain and without like suffering and all this kind of stuff. And that's
Right.
what, we that's the continuum of care from rehab to performance. And we talk about that all the time. So
Mhm.
definitely agree
Definitely.
with you there.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
yeah, and I love it. It's a great time, personally. What do you think?
Oh, dude. I mean, it's a blast. It's like showing up to work is fun for me. I mean, there's parts of it that, like are hard, and maybe like I would say tough, like I would say like the side tasks basically like the
Admin.
constant creation like the little like computer work it's like maybe that part's like the only part that I can think of that's like maybe not quite as fun sometimes, but like
Definitely.
70% of the time I love what I do, and I think that's a huge thing or a huge part of my decision of what I wanted to do years ago is like I would hate to be doing something that I just don't enjoy. I just don't
Definitely.
see any sense of that. So, but yeah, just glad to be here.
Yeah, and I think we're positioned where we need to be, just like you said, because like our interests are going to make us more passionate about what we do. And that's how I got into this as well, through tricking and through just having
Hmm.
injuries of my own and being like, oh, I would like to fix this. And then being like, Oh, I fixed it. Wow, that's crazy from some internet exercises. And then my friends would get the same injuries, and I'd be like, yo, this is what I did. And then they would feel better. And I would be like, oh, I feel
It's cool.
great. Like, you can do that now again. That's like so awesome.
Yeah.
And so
No, it's
here we
awesome,
are many, many years later, just doing it on a bigger scale. So that's all it is.
dude. Yeah. And
But
whenever like they have those wins of, feeling better or being able to perform at the 100%, like I feel like that same satisfaction, like versus if I just accomplished that. So I think that's the coolest part is just seeing someone go from, feeling limited, feeling like they can't participate in the activities they want or the work they want to do, and seeing them thrive and not only just being like, oh, it doesn't hurt anymore, but like, oh, like this feels better than it was prior to this injury. And I think to me, that's the most satisfying thing as a provider. And I'm sure you can relate. It's just seeing people get to that level is just very satisfying.
yeah, yeah, breaking the barriers of like, oh, I never thought I could do that again, or I never thought I could do that in general, and then being like, oh, I was injured, so I definitely can't do this now, and to all the way to like, oh my God, it happened.
Right.
Like
No,
so
totally.
many examples. It's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
So one of the last things I wanted to talk about today is your new program on the TrickStrong app.
Oh,
So
yeah.
on the TrickStrong RX app, we have a mobile app that we have our strength and mobility programming for anyone who wants to join. It is
Hmm.
basically geared towards movement athletes, and Parker is has just created a new program called KickStrong 2.0. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So this is actually a revamp of the original Kickstrong program. So I think at the time we didn't even have the app. I think it was just all through the webpage.
Yep.
So times are different now. So yeah, with the new program, it's an all-inclusive program of just how to prepare your body for higher levels of kicking. And I think this is great for whether you're a beginner, maybe you're first getting into tricking or martial arts. Um, and it doesn't just have to be tricking, obviously. It could really be whatever discipline you are in currently. If it involves kicking, you want to get better at it, this is the program I would highly recommend. And even if you've been doing this for a long time, this can also be a very good challenging program. I mean, doing some of the exercises already, like I feel very challenged, and I've been doing this for a long time. So
You're
all of
humble.
this is scalable. But yeah, so I mean, Neil watched me do most of it. So because we filmed it last week. So but yeah, we are honestly really excited for this program, and I think it's going to help a lot of athletes out there for not only just developing good proper technique, but also developing the hip and core strength really required for all this because I feel like a while ago, like kicking, the way to get better at kicks was just to stretch more, like growing up as a kid, it was just like, yeah, you just got to stretch more, you got to do more splits. And sure, that helps to an extent, and just doing 1,000 kicks. But this is another way. And I think it's a lot better. And, this isn't just random, like, oh, like exercises that can kind of work. Like, this is stuff that has been shown by research to work and things that have worked for clients as well. So this is not only just like a martial arts perspective, but it's also a clinical perspective too. So I think this is really just the best program out there, if I'm being honest, if you're really just wanting to get better at kicks as a whole and you're wanting to improve hip mobility. So yeah, I definitely suggest giving it a shot and see how it benefits your training.
I'm excited. I want to
Yes.
try it.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, we'll all be on it. So
yeah, definitely. It comes out this Monday, so let me see what date that is. It's March 3rd. Comes out March 3rd, so you can go on trickstrong.com and check that out and join the app, and then it will be on there on the 3rd. But yeah, thank you so much for all of that. I'm excited for the
yeah.
program, excited for what we're doing and expanding all this. Is there anything, well, actually before that, before our little closing, we have a little Q&A. We only have one. So if for
Oh
anyone
yeah.
watching, yeah, for anyone watching, we're going to put out Q&As for each of these podcasts that are coming out now. So, and we'll answer them live. So we had a Q&A on our story, and that's where they're usually going to be. And then you're just going to answer the story, and you're going to let us know what you want answered. And today we only have one, and it's a funny
One
one
golden question.
by Casey Tricks on Instagram. He says, if ligaments were people, who do you got the most beef with, and who's your bro? And to be honest, I didn't I still don't know my answer yet. So this is on the spot. I did read it and I did laugh, but I didn't think to have an answer in advance. Do you? Do you have something to start with?
Uh,
So let me say the
I,
question
I'll.
again.
No, no. I think. No. Who do I have beef with? Maybe we could start there. Well, ATL is like the most common ligament injury if you think about it.
AT.
So
Oh, okay. ATFL.
ACL,
Oh,
ATFL
ACL.
is also,
ACL. Okay, got you.
but ATFL is also a second runner-up. Man, I don't know, man, because like okay, personally on a personal level, ATFL I have the most beef with on a personal level, but I feel like for society, I would say like ACL. But what about you for beef?
Beef? I mean, yeah, ACL.
Yeah,
That guy's, he could be stronger.
right.
He could support you more.
Yeah, he definitely could. He definitely could.
So I definitely got beef with him. Uh,
Yeah,
who's my bro though?
yeah, that's a tough one.
I
Like,
don't
how do
have
you
any
pick like
favorite
one?
ligaments. Like which ones are all? It's still intact. I don't know.
Yeah, like I don't know. Like, dang. But it's like at the same time, like maybe who I have beef with is who I end up becoming bros with. You know what I mean? Like just to flip the script here, because like at one point I was having beef with my ACFL, but then we became bros. So like I don't know if that maybe is a good answer or not, but might
It's
have
a,
to part two on this one.
I like it. I'm gonna stick with that because it's like you have to make peace with your injuries. So I think whoever you have beef with, it has to become your bro so you can move on and prosper.
Yeah, that's my final answer. ATFL for all the above.
There you go. And for those of you who don't know, that's in your ankle. That's the one that when you roll your ankle, that's what he's
Yeah.
talking about. But yeah, so we're gonna leave that question alone now. And if you guys want to have any serious or joking type questions, that's fine. Just hit us up
I
on
mean,
the
that was pretty
stories.
serious. I don't know
Yeah,
about you. I mean, there's beef.
yeah, it was a little traumatic, but yeah. Um, but yeah, before we head out, do you have any words of advice for the viewers or any last thoughts? Maybe, and to help guide you in that question, it could even be somebody who might be in school right now, thinking about what they want to do, thinking about this field, or thinking about combining their passions, because that's something that you've done. You've taken your passions in martial arts, tricking, chiropractic care, just healthcare in general, movement, and just kind of put them all into one place.
Hmm.
So, do you have any advice for somebody like that?
Yeah. My biggest advice is once you have found your why, stick with it because me, like I definitely am not someone that, in my opinion, is like fit out for school. But because my why was strong enough, I felt like that was something that overrided that. So, there's always going to be a way to make things work if you are passionate about it. So, like, no matter what it is, whether it's, if you are interested in healthcare, I mean, me and Neil are always here to answer questions. But, regardless of anything you're pursuing, I mean, if your why is strong enough, you're going to go a lot farther than not sticking with it. So if there's any piece of advice that I would give, is sticking with your why. And I think having that intact always throughout everything you do is just going to impact you a lot. So
Love it, bro. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Appreciate everybody watching, and we will see you soon for the next one.
yes.